In the second of these video lectures over music of Native America, I'll be examining two Navajo songs, both of which are associated with sacred ceremonies of high seriousness. In the case of both songs, I'll be talking about melodic characteristics that are typical of Navajo singing and exemplified by both. I'll also be talking about the vast differences between the two songs and how those differences can be accounted for. First, we hear Yabichai, the centerpiece of the Nightway ceremony. The Nightway ceremony is the most important Navajo curing ritual and can last over a week. It involves a great deal of singing, dancing, praying, feasting, smoking, and so on. And its most important focal point is the Yabichai song. The ceremony aims at the restoration of lost balances, and the Yabichai song is said to represent the calls of the gods themselves. Listen. Although that song was sung in unison to the accompaniment of a rattle and was hence lacking in the kind of casual polyphony that resulted in the Sioux grass dance on account of overlapped call and response phrases, this music is far more complicated than either of the Native American songs I presented in the last lecture. The title Yabichai means the gods, our ancestors, but the song was sung entirely in vocables. The complexity lies in its form. The song cycles through a number of short melodic fragments in no readily discernible order, although the flawless performance of the singers must mean that there is a detectable order. I simply haven't discovered it yet. The melody consists of only 6 notes, which happen to be the 3rd through 8th partials of the harmonic series on E-flat. These are the kinds of tonal relations that can be discovered with the use of a natural trumpet, a point I made in my previous lecture regarding the Iroquois song Gadashut. The result sounds almost like trumpet music, but rendered by the very untrumpet-like human voice. A number of men, certainly more than 2, are singing the song, and the upper 6 notes of the melody are so high that they all use falsetto to reach them. Even the 2 notes that are sung in full voice are fairly high for them, and are certainly too high for me to sing, and the result is a kind of vocal straining that lends an added dimension of intensity to the song. The most remarkable feature of the melody is an athletic sounding leap of an octave from the low tonic to the high, full voice to falsetto, followed by a melodic descent that eventually returns to the low tonic, whence the leap happens again. This pattern is heard many times in a couple of permutations. Listen. It seems to me that any time you hear Native American singing that involves that distinctive melodic configuration, it's a fairly safe bet that the music is Navajo. In the spirit of the question, what can this music contribute to our understanding of the world, I want to make two comments. The first is aesthetic. This complex music has been described as Navajo classical music, and I believe that's an apt description. What jumps out at the listener is the song's formal complexity, complex almost to the point of being opaque. Now consider the fact that a culture that values complexity in its music will probably value the same quality in its other arts as well, and that's certainly the case with Navajo art. If you visit an art museum with a substantial Native American collection, the Nelson Atkins in Kansas City, one of my personal favorites, comes readily to mind, you'll likely discover that Navajo culture is disproportionately represented in that collection. There's a good reason for this. Collectors have long prized Navajo ceramics, tapestries, costumes, and paintings for their extraordinary use of color and pattern. This is also represented in their sand paintings, ephemeral works of art not unlike the colored sand mandalas lovingly and painstakingly assembled by Gyuto monks in Tibet, only to be wiped out of existence almost immediately upon the finishing of the work. It can be sobering to try to plumb what this might represent. That's your mission for the day if you're willing to accept it. The other point I want to make is this. The Nightway ceremony is often performed on behalf of returning combat veterans. The Navajo are famously patriotic, and many of their young men and women volunteer for service in one of the branches of the U.S. Armed Forces. If you do this, you of course run the risk of being sent to a distant land and put in a position where you must shoot at other people and will likely be shot at by them. Unsurprisingly, this often results in deep injury, not just physically, which is bad enough, but psychologically, spiritually, you might say. PTSD is a very real and debilitating condition, and to expect that someone going through an experience like that will just be able to pick up where they left off and go on with their lives as though nothing adverse had ever happened is not only unrealistic, but heartless and cruel. But because that expectation does seem to be the norm in a society that has commodified absolutely everything, including human life, the results are just awful, reckoned in domestic dysfunction, substance abuse, and suicide. But in Navajo lands, when a young soldier returns from the field of combat, the tribe drops everything it's doing and devotes itself exclusively to the performing of the Nightway ceremony on behalf of that wounded warrior. It comes to a week-long embrace by the entire community of that young man or woman, letting them know that we are your family, we are here for you, and will do whatever it takes to restore you to health and wholeness. That's got to have a powerful effect, doesn't it? Knowing that about it, listen to the song again, entering into its spirit as deeply as you can and imagining the impact on a wounded warrior who knows that those elders are calling on the spirits of departed ancestors to come and take charge of this life. Now I'm going to shift the focus, but with Navajo ceremonial music still in view. The next song comes from the more modest Enemy Way ceremony, which is also sometimes used as a curing ritual. The name of the song is Shisenae, and like the song Gadashot, which I presented in the first of these lectures, it includes both vocables and actual words. Superficially, it could hardly be more different from the dead serious Yabichai that you've been listening to. Nevertheless, notice the melodic feature that occurs almost immediately, an athletic-sounding leap of an octave, followed by a gradual descent to the low tonic, followed by another leap and descent. This pattern happens 6 times during the song. Listen.
Hey,
Now, what did you pick up on as you listened to that song? Don't lose sight of the fact that one of the most important benefits of taking a class in world music is the refinement of your listening skills. Ideally, because you took this class, you'll become a more careful listener, will notice more as you listen to music, and will experience enhanced enjoyment because of it. Here are some of the things that might have caught your ear. First, unlike the Yabichai song you heard earlier, this music follows an easily discernible formal pattern. Second, the song's rhythmic profile was very different from that of Yabichai. Yabichai, like the Sioux grass dance, has a relentless, driven, metrical backdrop of fast beats. Although the percussion instrument in the case of Yabichai is a rattle, not a drum, it should be obvious enough that the rhythmic profiles of the two unrelated songs are very similar. Compare this to this. And now notice how different the rhythm of Shisenae is from that of both the grass dance and Yabichai. Third, you might have noticed that Shisenae, unlike any of the other Native American music we've heard so far, is in the pentatonic mode. That is to say, in the proper transposition, the song could be played entirely on the black keys of the piano. The same is true of many simple songs that hail from a European tradition, and I'll have a great deal more to say about that. Let's listen to the song again, and this time I'll provide a roadmap, phrase by phrase, of the overall form. For this level of analysis, I tend to use lowercase alphabet letters, and I encourage you to do the same. Now, an analysis that reads AABB, AABB, CC, AABB is obviously a work in progress, like a reducible fraction that one has not yet reduced. So let's reduce it. The repeated pattern, the one that we hear 3 times, is AABB. Since that's the first thing that we hear, I'll identify it as A, but using a capital letter for this section-by-section analysis. Whatever we first hear that's different from that pattern will, of course, be identified as B, and that will be the section with the Navajo words. So much for Shisenae's overall form. The song is in AABA form, a very common European song form, but not at all a Native American one. How can this be explained? Stay tuned. Regarding the song's rhythmic profile, that lilting, rollicking rhythm is not a Native American rhythm, a point I made earlier. So where does such a rhythm come from? Again, the answer is Europe, or more specifically, Europe via white America. It's the rhythm often known as compound time, usually notated as 6/8. It's the rhythm of doggerel poetry, such as you'd find in a Hallmark greeting card, or in the poem Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. It is the rhythm of sea chanties from England and barcarolles from France. Regarding the song's pentatonic content, that too is a borrowing from Europe. But is borrowing the right word? Consider this: a sustained European invasion of the Americas, that's surely the only way indigenous people could have seen and experienced it, isn't it? Began in the early 16th century, but it wasn't until the early 20th century that it became possible to record the songs of Native Americans. Had those songs remained the same during those 4 centuries of an ever-increasing presence of white Europeans on these shores, and a steadily dwindling population of Native Americans owing to disease, loss of habitat, and genocide? The answer is, of course not. Anytime one culture invades the territory of another and triumphs over the indigenes, the native culture is going to start compromising with the invaders for reasons of sheer survival. Those compromises will take place in all aspects of life, including the art of the indigenous people. As the natives come to adopt the dress and polities and manners of the invaders in hopes of blending in and surviving, their art will come increasingly to resemble that of the invading population. This has happened many times in human history, and if you want a good comparable instance to examine, look at the Mughal Empire in India during the early 16th through mid-18th centuries. The Taj Mahal, said by many to be the most beautiful building in the world, is an artifact of that cultural cross-pollination. The point I'm trying to make is that during the 4 centuries when Europeans were increasingly taking over the lands of Native Americans, but before there were any recording devices to capture their songs, the music of Native Americans was changing as those populations attempted to align themselves with the invaders, again for purposes of survival. I'll have much more to say about this in my 3rd lecture on Native America, but for now I'll move on. I indicated, and you heard, that the song includes both vocables and Navajo words, which are heard in the song's B section. The only information I have about this is what David McAllister wrote in his entry in Jeff Todd Titan's Worlds of Music, and I cannot vouch for its accuracy. But, having no other sources at hand, I will paraphrase him and hope he got it right. McAllister indicates that the words you hear in section B are not actually organized grammatically, that is, in sentences, but that they exist in a kind of free association. He says that the words might be understood as follows: I'm in luck, I'm in luck, she's leaning up against the storefront, looking everywhere for me. McAllister explains it this way. The cognitive dissonance between the image of a woman leaning up against a storefront while simultaneously stalking these lucky guys tells the tale. She obviously can't be doing both simultaneously, so which is it? McAllister goes on to note that the image of someone leaning up against a storefront suggests someone so inebriated that locomotion is impossible, so already the song is ironic. McAllister goes further to say that one of the sad facts of reservation life is that, given high rates of substance abuse and other dysfunctions, if you encounter someone who's so drunk that it's necessary to lean up against a storefront to keep from slipping from the face of the earth, that person is, in all likelihood, not a woman. Make of that what you will. There are certainly valuable lessons to be gained by probing it a little deeper. I will conclude my remarks by emphasizing that what you are hearing here is clearly music with a Native American surface, vocables, Navajo words. But if you look even a tiny bit beneath the surface, you can clearly see European music in Native American costume. This is not the last time you'll encounter this, as I'll have more to say about it in the 3rd lecture over Native America. For now, let's listen to this song once more, keeping in mind that it's a little humorous relief in an otherwise serious ceremony, and that some of its features are the result of cross-cultural pollination. Hey,
呀，是人呢，是人呢，看呀，是人是看到他的呀，哎呀，是人呢，是人呢，看呀，是人是看到他的呀，哎呀，哎呦，喂呀，哎呀，哎呦，喂呀，哎呀，哦你呀，哦你哟，喂呀，哎呀，哦你呀，哦你哟，喂呀，哎呀。